qualification is one of the most important goods of European citizens. It is citizens' currency on the labour market and catalyst of quality and innovation for the European economy. But how valuable is this currency, if not understood across borders? Formal vocational qualifications are usually easily understood at national level. An employer or a training provider can count on a common understanding of a national qualification and what can be expected from a holder of such a certificate. This gets more difficult if the candidate comes from abroad, because the European Union has very different vocational training systems that are hardly comparable with each other, and use very different terms and labeling. It is therefore difficult to understand or communicate the real value of a foreign qualification properly. But mobility of workers, not only national, but across borders, gets more and more important for the European economy and welfare. Skill shortages in one country that can not longer be compensated nationally can be compensated through job seekers from another country. One of the obstacles for such mobility of workers on a European labour market is the transparency of qualifications across borders. That's what the European qualifications framework has been put in place for. The EQF is an 8-level framework. The higher the level, the more advanced a knowledge, skills, and competencies associated with a certain qualification or certificate. Every formal qualification in Europe is referenced to one of these EQF levels. Usually this happens through a national qualifications framework. An example, Alex holds a freight forwarding qualification on level 6 of the Irish qualifications framework. He wants to get to France in order to work in his profession. In order to assess the value of his qualification, the recruiting company in France checks what level this is in France. Level 6 in Ireland equals level 5 on the EQF. Level 5 of the EQF equals level 3 in France. In this way, Alex's potential employer can easily assess the value of his qualification. In order to make qualifications comparable in this way, the EQF requires the measuring of qualifications based on the learning outcomes only. The outcomes of learning can be compared, while the way how training is conducted, or learning takes place, is hardly comparable between different countries, or even institutions. This paves also the way for the recognition of non- and informal learning. Another example. Alex's EQF Level 5 qualification was not his initial qualification. Originally he held a lower qualification only. But he gained a lot of additional knowledge, skills, and competencies while working on the job, and received his higher level qualification after going through a prior learning assessment. This was possible because learning outcomes can also be achieved on the job or elsewhere, and are not bound to the attendance of any kind of formal training. In Alex's case it was even a bit more complicated. He was not able to prove all the level 5 qualifications directly. His individual set of learning outcomes had some gaps that needed to be filled. This is where ECVET, the European credit system for vocational education and training, comes in. ECVET intends to provide for the accumulation of credits for a certain formal qualification. Alex was able to prove most of the necessary credits for his higher qualification, based on his prior learning experience. He gained the remaining credits through additional training. In this way he achieved a fully recognized higher qualification, without having to pass through an entire training. This of course reduces training time significantly, and increases motivation to go for a higher qualification. Alex did not need to repeat topics. He was already familiar with through his work experience, and saved time in this way. But ECVET can even more. Another example, Maria is a student with an initial vocational training, to become a logistics manager in Spain. She has the opportunity to spend parts of her formal training in Austria, in order to learn more about her field of work in another country, to learn the language, and improve her interpersonal and intercultural skills. She follows a regular training program in Austria, and will work alongside the apprentices, in an Austrian freight forwarding company during her stay. It is the intention of ECVET to facilitate this kind of learner mobility by providing a European concept to rely on, and a framework for the formal recognition of this kind of mobility as a part of vocational training in Europe. Just as the EQF. Also ECVET builds on the approach to make learning comparable based on the achieved learning outcomes, rather than on the way how learning takes place. The EQF proposes here the work with three descriptors, in order to describe learning outcomes: knowledge, skills, and competences. Knowledge is the facts, principles, theories and practices, that are related on a field of work or study. Skill means the ability to apply knowledge, and use know-how to complete tasks and solve problems. Competence means the proven ability to use knowledge, skills and personal, social or methodological abilities, in work or study situations, and in professional and personal development. Autonomy and responsibility are the two leading concepts of the descriptor competence, in the framework of the EQF. All this is meant to facilitate lifelong learning of European citizens, and the establishment of a real European labour market. In order to make qualification, the currency of European citizens, understood and recognised all over Europe. ECVET supports the implementation of the European Qualifications Framework, and of the European Credit System for Vocational Education and Training, by providing guidance and support to those implementing these concepts in their daily practice at grassroots level.